Virtually everyone is familiar with the term geopolitics, but have you ever heard of the term geoeconomics? It might be called a sister term, and it's something that many are not familiar with. The term references how political leaders attempt to leverage their economic power for political purposes. The rise of a mercantilist president in the United States is not only the most recent example of this, but likely also the most extreme we've ever witnessed. What disturbs me is that the business press spends a lot of time talking about economic indicators, housing starts, inflation rates, central bank policy, employment statistics, all that sort of stuff, but seldom talks about how those indicators might be affected by political events. In essence, the front pages and business pages often work in silos. They seldom spill over into each other's territory. That's even truer when talking about the interplay between politics and capital markets, which is seen as taboo. Some say polarizing, while others allege it's just beyond the purview of a political commentator to weigh in on what's going on in the stock market, and vice versa. The result is that everyone knows one consideration will have an impact on the other, but most people act as though the two fields operate autonomously. There are op-ed pages that sometimes weigh in on the interplay, but most of the time journalists stay in their lane. However, here's the thing. What we've seen south of the border over the past 10 months is far from normal. In fact, I can't help but notice how utterly abnormal things are. Donald Trump is both autocratic and kleptocratic in his behavior, while his press secretary is openly disdainful of legacy media. He has no real interest in traditional economic agendas and has an open indifference to reasonable public opinion, and that surely stands as a testament that he has no intention of even trying to be popular enough to win a free and fair election. He doesn't care about voters, and he goes out of his way to show it. The sitting president is now engaging in political retribution. He posts AI-generated videos of him wearing a crown while piloting a plane and bombing his own citizens with manure. Any leader using such juvenile imagery is unlikely to be taken seriously. The president is becoming more and more unpopular and seems to have dropped any pretense of doing anything statesmanlike. Instead, he's focused on fomenting a culture war, likely as a pretense for invoking the Insurrection Act in advance of the November 2026 midterm elections. It's often said that the most dangerous words in investing are, "This time it's different." But who wouldn't concede that what's going on in the US right now is radically different from anything any of us have ever experienced before? Despite this, the people who offer commentary on the economy and capital markets, and they're separate things, act as though everything is so unremarkable. They fail to mention the obvious dysfunction in Washington when talking about business. The most obvious unasked question revolves around what it might mean for your portfolio. Most of the talk involving political considerations remains confined to politics. Concepts such as the division of powers and the primacy and independence of the Supreme Court and the respect for well-established norms and institutions that have existed for a quarter of a millennium are all trotted out to placate the worriers. Of course, those checks and balances are being called into question involving political authority. But what if the all-powerful US president is hell-bent on scoring own goals on the economic front too? Never mind the political implications, can anyone stop the economic implications? Political self-harm is one thing when you don't intend to face voters in a democratic race. Economic self-harm is quite another consideration. When millions of those once voting peons lose their livelihoods because of Trump's madness, things are going to get real quickly. Until now, the premise has been that Donald Trump uses the stock market as a proxy for his efficacy as a political leader. Many see him as a market manipulator who is primarily interested in transactional policies that directly favor him and his inner circle. In fact, an AI-driven market bubble may be just the cover Trump needed to pull off that charade. As the broader societal impact and devastating effects of his across-the-board tariffs become unmistakable, it may come to pass that the culture war he desperately wants will be played out on a different battlefield. Virtually everything Donald Trump is doing was spelled out in Project 2025, yet many of his supporters insist they had no idea he would do these things. For instance, most American farmers in the heartland voted Republican last year. Many of them, soybean farmers for instance, must now feel betrayed. As such, presumed alliances may not settle in the way we expected. The bottom line is this. What if Donald Trump cared as much about American investors as he did about American voters? Indeed, if you're not worried about valuations, then maybe you should be worried about politics and how those things work together.